Welcome to the next video in the Suggestion App course. This is a complete course where we'll build a .NET 6 Blazor server application with MongoDB from the ground up. There are three things you need to know before we get started. First, this is part of a series, and this isn't the first video in the series. If you're just starting out, you should check out the playlist that's linked in the description to start from the first video in the series. Second, this course is actually a paid course. MongoDB sponsored it so you can put the videos on YouTube for free. Check out the link in the description to sign up for MongoDB Atlas for free to thank them if you haven't already. Third, you can also buy this course on imtimcorey.com. The link is in the description. Buying this course will get you all the lessons right away, the source code for each lesson, a certificate of completion, offline access, and more. It also helps sponsor more free content. The video will be the same as it is on YouTube, so feel free to watch the free version if you want to. Okay, let's jump into today's video. Note there may be more than one lesson in this video, since some lessons are short. The first step in knowing what to fix for your mobile layout is knowing what's broken. So let's start up the application and just see what doesn't look right for mobile. Now, the ideal way of doing this, meaning the way you'll know for sure what it's going to look like, is to actually deploy it and see it on a mobile device. But that's a slow process for development. There is an alternative. Let's hit F12 here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to pop this out and I'll put it over here. We're going to pull up this icon right here. If you zoom in here, it's the second most icon. Let's close out that message here. The second most icon from the left, it says toggle device emulation. And if we do that, that brings up our various devices. Now we can select, for example, an iPhone X, and this is what it should look like. But just note that it's not exactly right. Okay, it's not perfect. It's close. But sometimes this emulator gets it wrong. So don't think that it'll always be this way. It's always going to look this way. It may be a little bit different depending on how it renders. There is the responsive, which allows you to drag the different sizes, or you can pick the estimation of what an iPad might look like. Notice the zooming here. You should really be at 100%. Otherwise, what it looks like isn't going to be quite right. But there's what an iPad looks like, and then you could say, well, what does an iPad Pro look like? And there's a Surface Duo, and you can kind of play around with these different options to see roughly what they should look like. So we want to make it look good even on a smaller screen. Now, this one's pushing it. The iPhone 5 or SE, that's really pushing it. We should be more, at least in the 6, 7, 8 range of looking okay. Doesn't have to look perfect, but looking okay. So, and we're pretty close here. Notice how these three different ones have different widths. That's because of other archive works okay, but then 10-minute training in archive stretches a little bit more. Dev questions in archive stretches it even more. So we can start looking at it and say, okay, there's a problem there. Also, the category and status down here just don't work. Because if this list scrolls for a long time, well, that'll be a problem. Because if it does, we'll never see the category or status. And who wants to filter down there and search up here? And search is a little ugly. So there's a lot of tweaks we have to do in this section. We have some extra blue space up here that we probably get rid of on our mobile device. So the training suggestions not quite lined up with the centering of these three links either. So a lot of like little tweaks to do. We can start looking around at other pages and go, yeah, it's a little squished right there. So maybe we can do something better there. If you go to a specific one, that looks squished as well. But notice how at least it's for set status, it stacked them. So it can't do all 4 across, can't do more than 2 across. So it stacked them in 2 rows and then centered them. So that at least looks pretty decent. Not great, but not horrible. So we can definitely make this look better using some changes to our CSS and using also some layout changes. And I think we're going to start with is the layout changes. So the first layout change that I see is that these category and status need to come up here, and they need to be different. They can't just be a list. The other layout change I see is right now when we go to details, notice how we've got a lot of white space underneath the vote, where we could kind of stretch out, this is a suggestion created by, that I could stretch out the entire width instead of being just underneath or just in this column. So I think we could adjust that as well. And then we'll do a whole bunch of CSS tweaks for different breakpoints. And we'll figure out what the media queries should be for those breakpoints. So lots of stuff to do. We will leave the device emulation turned on so that when we hit F12 again, it will pop back up in that device emulation. Okay, so that's the way to test that, at least the first step for testing that. And then what you can do is just get a notepad out and start writing down all the things that you see that look wrong. And then you can start working on your CSS and your layout changes to make it better, and then try it again and keep iterating through that process. So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to tackle the suggestion page and rearrange how, or the index page with all the suggestions. We're going to rearrange how the status and category are displayed. Let's start by changing up how statuses and categories gets displayed. So let's go to the index page. Now, with Bootstrap, we get the ability to have rows and columns that come out of the box. And down here, we have our section for categories and statuses, and that section uses a column of 4 at medium and 3 at extra large. But we want to hide it below medium. So we're going to say is display is none. So this will not show the column at all. However, we can also say display at medium is block, and that goes up. So it's going to be a block at medium, at large, extra large, and so on. So that should hide our column below medium. Let's test to make sure. It's always good to test these things, especially when you're talking about various breakpoints. You want to make sure you get them right so you understand what's going on. Okay, so there's our category and status. If we hit F12, it pops up the developer tools. Let's go to responsive here. So let's scroll to the bottom, and that's the bottom. There are no category and status. If we shrink down, we can get tiny. I mean, it's just ridiculously tiny. There's no screen that we would be able to use the site on that would be that small, but that's okay. If we keep making it bigger, it's still not there. A little bigger, still not there. A little bigger, still not there. We'll find our breakpoint here. It's still not there at the bottom. Oops. So it's not there at the bottom, but as soon as we get to the width where we have the columns come in like this, category and status show up. So category and status aren't here as of around 767. I think it's 768 is the breakpoint. So, if we went to here, that's what the breakpoint is. 767 and below is a different breakpoint. So now we don't have category and status at all, which is okay. That's what we want as far as step 1. Step 2 is going to be to put category and status up here in a different way. So there's our breakpoint where we have category and status and then we don't. So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to apply category and status in a different section, a different way. So what this will do is it's going to display them underneath this section right here. So we have a search box, we have the sort buttons, and we're going to place below it one more section. Now this section we don't want to show unless we're in a small mode. So div class equals call 12 as I'm taking the whole width, which means it'll be on its own row. Display is block by default, but we're going to say display at medium is none. All right, so that's going to hide this, and this needs to be inside the quotes. There you go. That will display at medium of none, in theory. So we're going to find out, make sure that works. Again, it's always good to test these things. Now, we're going to have our categories and our statuses show up, but we're going to do things a little differently. If categories is not null, so there are a list of categories, and show categories, which you don't have yet. We're going to put that. We're going to have a variable called show categories, and this will expand out our categories list. Otherwise, we're going to contract that list and not show it. So let's come down to the bottom here and put this into our text. We'll put it right down here. We're going to have private bool. We should mark this one up here as private as well. So private bool show categories equals false, and private bool show statuses equals false. And that will allow us to know if we should show the full section or full selection of categories and statuses or not. Now, if we say yes, we're showing the categories, we're going to have div class equals categories, just like before, and we'll have a span with a class equal text uppercase and also font weight of bold that says category. Now I have to close out of my div before I go any further, otherwise I'll forget. There we go. And then we'll have in here a div that is class equal to at get selected category. And then at onClick equals, we'll have our open and close parens. And we're going to say arrow OnCategoryClick. And this will be for the all. Okay, so then we're going to have our for each. And I think the logic should be basically the same as down below, but we're going to type out anyways. For each var c in categories. So inside here, we're going to say div class equals, inside quotes, get selected category, c.category name. And we'll have onClick. Let's put this on a new line. Have our arrow and on category. Oh, we have to put this in quotes. That's why it's not giving me IntelliSense. On category click. And we'll say c.category name. Like so. There we go. And this will be at c.category name. And we can close that out Let's put this on a new line and this on a new line. There we go. So there's our categories, and that's if we are showing the categories. We're not going to show the categories all the time. We're only going to show the categories if they click on it. So else, we're going to have a div class equals categories, and then a onClick, and we'll have show categories equals true. That's an assignment, so it's only one equals. And then inside here, we'll have a span class equals selected category. And we'll say selected category. So if you have, let's close this div out. If you have selected a category, it's going to show and be bold and be just that category. But if you haven't selected, if you click on it, it's going to expand out to the full list of categories. You'll click on one, and that will be selected, and then it will shrink back down to just that one. Let's see this in action so you can visualize it, and then we'll do statuses. So right now I'll only see categories, but this way we can actually understand what's going on here. Now we don't see it here. We have to wait until we shrink it down, and now we see this right here. There's no categories at the bottom, but up here we see all. If we click on it, we can see, well, it's not formatted, but we can see a list of our categories. We can select in-depth tutorial, and now in-depth tutorial is selected, and it broke everything because it's not shrinking back down. We're gonna have to fix that. But that's the basic theory here, is that this would show us or collapse back down once it's selected. So it's going to look like this. We'll click on it, we'll select one, and then it will shrink back down to just that selected one. So we're getting there. It's not quite done yet. So the first thing I notice is categories instead of categories. That might cause the look to be wrong. And then let's look at the OnCategoryClick. I believe we're going to need to modify that. So if we shrink these down, it helps search through the list, because we could just do a search, but I prefer to browse through. OnCategoryClick. Well, we're not actually setting the show categories back to false, which means that OnStatusClick, show statuses equals false, will also need to be modified. So that should take care of that. Let's try it again. Hopefully it should look a little better this time. Wait for it to load. It's good, like I said, to test quickly, because then you notice these problems right away. We're shrunk down, we see all. Let's click on all. Ooh, that looks nicer. We can select dev questions. It collapses back down. It says dev questions. And now it makes it look a little nicer in a mobile friendly format, in that this is how you do the searches now instead, or the filters now, instead of having this list somewhere that we have to scroll past. So we're going to do the same thing for statuses. Hopefully we'll remember to type correctly, so we don't have the same problem we do with categories. So we have our if statement up here for categories. So then down below it is where we're going to put our if statement for statuses. Let's scroll down and say if statuses is not null and show statuses. And then in here, let's do it outside and move it in, because I really don't like that div issue. Div class equals statuses. And then we're going to have inside there a span with a class equal to text uppercase and font weight of bold. They'll say status. And then we'll have a div class equal to get selected status. And then we'll have an onClick for it with an arrow to OnStatusClick for for just all of them. There's no parameter since there's a default. And we'll say this is for all. And then we're going to have our for each that will have var s in statuses. And then inside there, we're going to have a div class equal to get selected status. Actually, let's just copy this. It's going to be just the same as this, with only a few tweaks. So get selected status, but this is going to be s.statusName. And the onClick, which we can put on a new line. And we can put this on a new line, like so. There we go. The OnStatusClick is going to pass in the s.statusName. And then down here, this will be at s.statusName. Like so. That gives us what's going to happen if, and let's move us back into the if. We can fix the formatting. So that's going to happen if the statuses are not null and if we have the show status as Boolean set to true. Now, if not, then I'll do the else here. I'll do this outside though. Div class equals statuses. And then we're going to have an onClick for this. And we'll say shows statuses equals true. And that is an assignment. So only one equals. I keep saying that because this is normally, a lot of times this can be a comparison. We don't want that. We want to make sure we have only a single equals. A comparison would not give us the right operation there. Span class equals selected status. And at selected status, like so. So let's move that into the else. We'll fix our formatting. And there we go. There's our status section as well. So let's run this, make sure it works. We already fixed the code down below, so I think this should work unless I had another typing error. So category and status are on the right-hand side. Let's click completed and dev questions. Now I'm going to hit F12. And notice dev questions and completed are still selected, but they're in this smaller box. So they're not at the bottom. And if I go to all, there's the all list. And if I go to all for categories, I get all of these as well. So it's a subtle thing. It's a small thing. Notice it doesn't say what this is, category or status, until you open it up. We could probably put something else in here, but I think that when you open it up, it says category, so we're going to call that good. So we want to keep this as subtle, as compact, and as logical as possible for the mobile experience. And I think this works. Even on a pretty small phone, that's going to look just fine. Now, we still have the formatting to do. Don't worry, we'll get there. There's a lot of things to make this look prettier, but functionally, this works a whole lot better now than it used to. You know, functionally, this really does work the way we want it to. Okay, so we're going to leave off there, and next up, what we're going to do is we're going to tackle the details page where we can make the bottom text a little larger. Our next task is to take on the layout of the details page. Let's run the application so we can see what's going on with the details page and what we're going to adjust. So we have let's go to our fifth suggestion, and notice that this size looks fine. But if we hit F12 to bring up our developer tools and shrink this page, notice that as we get smaller, we can have some white space underneath this date. And if this right here, the suggested creation thing, the text, the description, that can get kind of long. That could take use of the full width as opposed to just what it has here. As we get smaller, there's even more space that's just not being used that we could take advantage of. So we're going to, at the small, so at the 767, right here and below, we're going to move the description and this other, the category. We're going to move those and give them the full width instead of only allowing them to have just the width that this section has. So let's close this out and let's go to the details page. So on the details page, we can come down to the where it says category. We have category name and description. We're going to hide these two when they are below the threshold of medium. So we're going to say display is none, and then display is going to be medium, or at medium is going to be block. So by default, don't display this, but when you get to the medium, change the display type to block. And we're going to do the same thing for this right here, which is our category name. So right now they should disappear at the medium or below the medium breakpoint. Let's try it out, make sure that it does before we then try to show them somewhere else. So our fifth suggestion, they're still there. Let's hit F12, and now they're gone because we're below that breakpoint. If we go a little bit above it, they're there, they're gone, they're there, they're gone. So, and they'll stay gone the whole time. So that's the first step in the process, but we need to have a next step, otherwise we're not going to be able to see them, which is we're going to have a div class equals row, and we'll also make this a display of block by default, but then display at medium of none. So this is going to hide once we get to the medium height, or width, I guess. There we go. I'm inside an if, that's why it's caused me problems. So then we're going to have our div class equals suggestion detail text. And again, I have to self-close this. And then I'll have a div with a suggestion dot description. And we'll have one more with a class equal to suggestion entry text category. And this is suggestion.category name. There we go. So that section now will display the description and category at the full width, at the full row, but only if we are below medium. Let's verify this is actually the case, and it doesn't have any weird layout issues. Now, with our small demos, it's not going to be great because like our fifth suggestion, that's a very small suggestion name. There's not a lot of wording there, and that's too short really for a suggestion. Normally it'd be something more like, I want to see a Redis cache in production use, or I want to see how Docker Compose works with ASP.NET Core. Like that's a longer title. So our short titles make it look like no big deal. And our short descriptions make it look no big deal either. But when we get a longer 300 plus character description, that'll make a difference. But let's see what this looks like now. So there's our breakpoint. Notice that it's now underneath and the full width. So as we get smaller, it takes up the full width instead of half the width. Now, as we get larger, we hit the breakpoint. So 767 is the largest we can go. And then we watch it hop up right there. You see, we had it in the column and now it's the full width. So little tweaks like that can make a big difference when it comes to our layout. Now we're also going to shrink this down and do some other things, but that gives us some layout changes and examples of how to do layout changes to make things work well on mobile and maybe relay out our page in a way that makes better sense for the medium we're on. All right, so that is the layout changes. Next up, what we're going to do is start working on our media queries themselves. Right now, we have some tweaks that have to be done to our site in order to make it mobile friendly. It works on mobile, but we've got the layout changes we needed to done. So if we look at this, it works, but like this overhang here, that's weird. The fact that these two are touching, that's weird. The spacing between these, that's weird. The blue space up here, that's weird. Should I go on? The list of weirdness is pretty large. The different sizes here, weird. So what we're going to do is we're going to tweak a lot of these settings. And there's a lot to tweak on all of these things. But I could, I debated how to show this to you, because what I did was I went through and said, okay, that button touching the search, that's weird. Let's tweak that. We tweaked that. And then we went to the next thing and the next thing, and that took hours. But that's the process you go through. You go step by step. And if you're using, reusing your classes, it helps, because if you adjust a class once, it adjusts it everywhere. Although that can be problematic too, because of the fact that if you adjust it everywhere, you got to check everywhere to make sure it's not weird on one page. So that can be a challenge as well. But I don't think that works well for showing you on video, because of the fact that you're going to spend a lot of time just going, yeah, Tim, okay, come on, let's get this next thing done. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to walk you through all of the changes that I make. We're going to do all the changes to the media queries at once. And then from there, I will walk you back through the site and make sure that you understand the layout and it looks good. So let's talk media queries. The very bottom of your CSS, what we're going to do is we're going to put 2 media queries. That's all we're going to need for this project. Media, screen, and max width is going to be, for this first one, 575 pixels. Now, CSS applies top down, and so we're going to apply this first, but only if the width of the screen is at maximum 575 pixels. So this applies to the screen, not to print. Again, the foundation web development goes over media queries in depth if you needed that. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do, including creating some cool print layouts. But we're not going to create a print layout for this site. I don't think it's worth our time. So let's start with this set of media queries. We're going to have just a couple here: btn approve and btn reject. We're going to adjust these to have a width of 45% each. The suggestion entry, we're going to have the grid template columns be adjusted to 100 pixels, 1 FR, and 45 pixels. If you remember, the columns originally were 142 pixels. So we're taking out about, a third of our space by taking away those 42 pixels so that we can make the vote up section smaller, which will give more room to everything else that's going to be displayed. And then we have the suggestion entry, no votes, suggestion entry voted, and the suggestion entry not voted. And for these, we want the min height to be 100 pixels to match up with the grid template column to make that square layout. And that's all I have for this smallest of sizes. We're going to have one more. This will have a lot more to it, but it's media screen and max width, there we go, is 767 pixels. So this is for a little bit larger size that it will apply. And we're going to have the search box. We're going to tweak this a little bit. We're going to have those BS gutter X to be inherit. And we're going to have a margin top of 10 pixels. So we had set the BS gutter X to, I believe it was 3.5 RAM or something like that. But now we're going back to inheriting once we get to a smaller size. Our nav links, we want to adjust those. We want to say that justify content should be center. So we're going to center those links instead of right justifying them. A login link should be a flex of 1, and padding left should be 0. We put some padding on the left in order to space them out when they flexed to the right, and now we're going to center them, and we're going to make sure that each takes up the same amount of space, and it has no padding, so they're exactly in the center of their spacing. Categories, statuses. So at this smaller size, we want the margin to be 0. We want the margin top, so we'll override that already, 10 pixels. We want the padding to be 0.375 rem. Yes, I had to figure that one out. And padding left, we're going to be at 0.75 rem. So notice that 375 times 2 is about 7.5 or 0.75. So that's our categories and statuses for the padding. Next up, we have our suggest container or suggestion container. And that's the margin bottom. It's going to have 1 rem. And we'll have our create form, which I don't think we have. We took that out. So we're going to skip that. Detail form. If you don't find the IntelliSense, then you got to wonder, is it actually here or not? I don't find detail form or create form, so I think, actually, you know what? No, we do have these, create form and detail form. They're not in IntelliSense because of the fact that they're not in the regular styling, but we put these two classes here just for our small sizes. Margin, 0. Margin bottom, 1 rem. So detail form, and that is, it's the same thing. So we really could just put like this. Makes life simpler. to have both of those together. Form layout, padding 1 rem. Submission, that's going to have a margin, well, no margin actually, but margin is 0. It will have some padding, and margin bottom will have 0.5 rem as well. Suggestion results, padding 0. Margin top also 0. Then we'll have our admin details. So we're adjusting a lot of the margins here so that we kind of move things and shift things around to fit with the styling needs of a mobile device. Okay, in mobile devices, we want to have better use of our space. We don't have this massive screen. Suggestion, detail, status section, padding 0.5 rem. Suggestion, detail, suggestion, font size is 1 rem. Which you may say, hey Tim, why are you setting it to 1 rem? Because 1 rem is the default, right? Well, yes, but only if it wasn't set to something else. And I believe suggestion, detail suggestion was set to 1.25 rem originally for the larger sizes. So setting to 1 rem puts it back to the standard size. Suggestion, detail text, padding left. I am going to say 12 pixels here. Yes, it's an exact number, but that's what I got to work. And the font size may change, so let's just leave it at that. Suggestion, entry, text, category. Padding top 0.5 rem. And that's it. That's the set of media queries. So let's do this. Let's go now and run it and just see, make sure it actually does work. All right, we hit F12, and notice we have a better layout now. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to kind of walk through and just make sure that everything looks about right. Perfect isn't going to happen, but we want this to be close enough where we go, yeah, I can definitely sign off on this for a version 1, and we can talk about the tweaks that we might want. Because here's the deal, you're always going to want more tweaks. Well, what if we move this 1 pixel different? What if we adjust that 1 pixel? Or what if we change? Slow your roll, give it time, think it through and say, well, maybe we should just keep it consistent. Maybe we should not make it overly complicated. Maybe we should get version 1 out the door. Then, if we really feel strongly about something, we can go back and change it for version 1.1. So, notice the links up top, admin, profile, and logout, they're spaced evenly. If we look down here, we see that search, all, and all, these are all matching in size. They're spaced nicely between each other. The new and popular are spaced properly. So that looks good. Let's do this. There we go. So new and popular still do work. Just it's weird because they didn't change anything. When it's like this, you can't see any changes between the two. But if you vote up the first suggestion and then hit popular, notice now the first suggestion is up here. So yes, it does work. Category courses, there we go. So that works. But it looks right. We got a little bit of spacing at the bottom here. We go to our 5th suggestion. Notice a little bit of blue around the sides. The layout looks right. If we shrink it down, still works. Okay. Notice also the upvote boxes are smaller. So if we watch the upvote, like 5 upvotes, if we watch that, it gets bigger right there. Smaller, bigger, smaller, bigger. So we could probably shrink down the contents even more, but I think that works for us, at least for now. Yes, we do still have a staggered sizing right here at this point. At 320 pixels, we have some staggering. I am not going to concern myself with that too much because 340 pixels, that's a very narrow screen. And the staggering is actually the opposite of what you think it is, probably. The actual width of the screen is to the edge of these white boxes, or just beyond. So these others are actually going off the screen. This is larger than 338 pixels. These others would be going off a screen at this point. So notice that as we get smaller, our boxes don't really seem to get smaller. It's just these things, the top things, that get smaller. That's because they're conforming to the correct size. Our boxes are just locked in at they can't get any smaller. So yes, if our screen is smaller than, let's call it 362 pixels, let's call it a little bigger than that, actually, 380 pixels. So anything smaller than 380 pixels is too low for our resolution and will cause our site to look a little weird. I'm okay with that. 380 is pretty small. iPhone 678 says 375. That still looks fine. So I'm okay with that. We're also going to get some really weird sizing if we put tons of data in here, which some people will have. So 75 characters will make this a lot larger. So it's going to happen, but we try to make it as good as possible for the screens without just shrinking down all the content so it's invisible. So I think that works. I think that what we have is a working set of media queries that really does lay the page out nicely, gives us some breathing room around our little pop-up style things, while at the same time allowing us as much space as possible to actually put content. So that's how you do media queries. You just kind of keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and checking and checking and checking over and over again. And then once you've done that, give it to a friend and have them point out all the problems. I'll tell you what, they're going to find some that you didn't notice. So definitely have that tried out. We're going to be doing testing in a little while just to kind of show off how I would test both the happy path and the edge cases. But next up, what we're going to do is we're going to start working on cleaning up our Blazor content and moving that code out from being on the page with the HTML.